Welcome to the debut of On the Record.
Every Sunday, we're taking a fresh approach, developing the time and context, and covering relevant stories in depth,
as well as important political topics and meaningful conversations with change makers.
We're also exploring solutions to issues and topics impacting our communities.
This morning, we're going on the record about Florida's homeowner insurance crisis.
Florida nearing a gut-wrenching anniversary. A storm that shook the state to its core, Hurricane Ian.
Some of the damage was, almost indescribable.
And it is pretty devastating. And what it really does is left the place almost unrecognizable.
I don't want to try. It's too much. It's really hard.
In the shadow of catastrophe, an insurance crisis ballooned.
They're dropping people, and it's just, I feel for everybody.
Can we ever get a reduction?
This morning, WPBF 25 News goes on the record, taking a deep look at the home insurance crisis and who's paying the ultimate price. From WPBF 25, this is On the Record with Todd McDermott and Nathalie Pozo.
Good morning. I'm Todd McDermott.
And I'm Nathalie Pozo. Thank you for welcoming us into your homes for the debut of On the Record.
This morning, we're going in depth on the property insurance crisis impacting millions of Florida homeowners, still playing out at the height of this hurricane season as we near the one-year mark since the Florida landfall of Hurricane Ian.
The Category 5 hurricane made landfall on Florida's west coast on September 28th, setting records unlike anything the state has ever seen. Deadly storm surge, catastrophic flooding, and more than $112 billion in damage.
Thousands of people are still waiting for claims to be paid out as Florida's property insurance market spirals. That includes navigating the exodus of insurance companies and those skyrocketing premiums. Right now, every county from the Palm Beaches through the Treasure Coast is averaging an annual premium above $2,900.
Palm Beach County has nearly twice that amount at $5,700. That is the second highest average in the state, only trailing Monroe County. People who live in Palm Beach County are sharing their thoughts with us about the crisis.
It seems like they want us to be homeless or something. Everything, food, gas, insurance, everything's going up.
Premiums are at an all-time high with insurance. We need to get them down in the state of Florida. Hopefully our constituents up in Tallahassee will get it down and people can reap the benefits down here because Florida is a great place to live. We just got to get that insurance back down.
Now let's go on the record on the issue. Joining us, Democratic State Senator Bobby Powell, Republican State Representative Rick Roth. Gentlemen, thank you both for being here for our inaugural episode of On the Record. Right away, let's talk first, and I'll start with you, Representative Roth, about the state legislature passing a series of bills. We have new laws that have helped insurance companies either to remain solvent or to stay in the state of Florida. That's been the focus. Is now the time to focus on somehow helping homeowners pay these premiums, either freezing the premiums or somehow subsidizing it so people can afford them?
Thank you, Todd, for being here today. This really is a great opportunity for the Senator and I to talk about these issues. This is a very difficult problem that we're dealing with. We're really been in a crisis for several years. You know who the luckiest governor is in Florida? It's Charlie Crist. He had no hurricanes for 4 years when he was governor, but we've had a lot of hurricanes, 3 in the last years that I've been a state representative, and they've done untold amount of damage. So we are really struggling with high costs. We have a lot of people moving to Florida. We have housing prices going up, so the cost of insuring those houses are going up. I think we took a good stab at it, but I do believe there's more we can do.
I'll tell you this, the legislature has had the opportunity. We've had 2 special sessions, and then during session we had a minimal amount of time that we focused on insurance. It's been a crisis. We have not done what we need to do as a legislature to make sure that we're protecting consumers here in the state of Florida. We've given billions of dollars to the insurance companies with no commitment to make sure that they're staying in the state of Florida and to make sure that the consumers have an insurance policy that will pay them if we go through a catastrophe. We've seen it here in Florida, a number of hurricanes. We've had tropical storms. All over this nation, we've seen hurricanes, earthquakes, typhoons, wildfires, natural disasters that we should work together to figure out how to cover the consumers here in the state of Florida.
Senator, based off of what you just said there, do you think that lawmakers can save the collapsing insurance market?
I believe that if we all work together, bring everybody to the table, and come up with a comprehensive approach that involves the consumers, that involves the insurance companies, that involves attorneys, that involves all of the players in this, that it can be resolved. Unfortunately, what we had at the last special session was a shortened time frame that not a lot of players or stakeholders had an opportunity to provide input, and it was pushed through the process really, really quickly, which now we've seen the impact is we've been told that 18 to 24 months we'll see some changes. However, if you've been looking recently, we have not seen reductions in the cost of homeowners insurance.
We know the federal government steps in after a disaster, but is the time now for a different approach, something like the National Flood Plan, where all states pay in so that there is mitigated risk for states? Because we know that California may have wildfires, Maui in Hawaii has wildfires, there are tornadoes, hurricanes, blizzards. Is it possible that we need to look at a larger issue where the federal government addresses what's happening here in a state like Florida?
Of course, that's a very good option, and I like the way the senator explained it, but the bottom line is we have done some really great things in the state of Florida. If you're talking about regulating by litigation, we've tried to cut down on that. If you've talked about trying to reduce the number of lawsuits, I mean, we've had fraud, we've had roofing companies soliciting business and causing fraud. We've had assignment of benefits. We've had a lot of bad actors in the state of Florida over the years, and we had to change some of the laws. You know what's really funny is we have a state Speaker of the House, Paul Renner, who's actually a lawyer, that was willing to go against the lawyers and try to mitigate some of the problems we had by making it more difficult to have fraudulent lawsuits. We did that in so many ways. We had one bill, civil remedies, which I'm very, very proud of. It's kind of hard to explain, but that's why I'm here tonight, is to talk about the things that we actually did that are going to help.
So is there any silver lining here? You know, we've passed multiple laws that have reduced the amount of fraud. So do the negatives outweigh the positives?
At this rate, I'll say, Nathalie, that the cost has not outweighed the benefits. We haven't seen the first bill we passed was in May of 2022, and now it's September, right? And we were told that 18 to 24 months that we would see some changes. Well, it's 16 months. And as I've looked yesterday, I've seen insurance policies continue to increase. I pushed amendments, and so did several of my colleagues, push amendments to either cap those increases at 5% or less. Those were shot down. This was not a very consumer-friendly piece of legislation that we moved, although there were some good parts to it. Not a lot of good parts that would help the average person here in the state of Florida. As you've indicated, we've seen insurance rates here in Palm Beach County, $5,700 on average. We're second only to Monroe County. That's astronomical. People cannot afford to live here in the state of Florida, and if you don't have insurance and you have a mortgage, you're going to run the risk of being kicked out of your home. We as a state, we can work comprehensively. Yes, we can have all these issues that keep moving from, as Representative Roth indicated, assignment of benefits to sinkholes to fraud. But the number one thing that we have to do is figure out how to work together to be able to resolve these issues, and right now that has not been done.
Can the legislature actually approach this in terms of consumers paying these high premiums? Is that a step that they can take?
Well, I think we're kind of approaching the narrative the wrong way. We're making the argument that the consumer and the insurance companies are on opposite sides. I don't agree with that. I think of an insurance company, because I'm a businessman, I buy life insurance because I have risk, and if I die, I want my company to survive, so I have Keyman Insurance. So insurance is spreading risk. It's a tool that everybody uses to survive in our economy, and the good news is we attacked the increasing cost. We attacked some of the lawsuits, we attacked a lot of things. We also dealt with bad faith. We talked about one-way attorney's fees. We did a lot of things that previously were set up to benefit the legal profession versus the insurance company. I will say that the Democrats in 1986 did do away with joint and several liability, and that was a benefit. We went to comparative negligence. So we're going in the right direction, but people need to understand It is going to take time, and when you lower the cost of lawsuits to an insurance company, rates will come down.
Coming up next here on the Record, the insurer of last resort is now the only choice for more than 1.3 million Florida homeowners. How the home insurance crisis is squeezing Citizens Property Insurance Corporation, even as it offloads policies to private insurers. We're going to go on the record about the issue when we return.
You're watching On the Record on WPBF 25.
We are seeing people who are trying to decide, can I stay in Palm Beach County any longer? Can I stay in Florida any longer? And the answer is sometimes no.
You just heard Gregory Buck, the owner of a local independent insurance agency, describe what he calls the doom and gloom scenario tied to Florida's home insurance crisis.
He says it's only going to get worse because the state's biggest insurer, we're talking about Citizens, is now bursting at the seams. More than 1.3 million Floridians insure their homes with Citizens Insurance, and nearly all of them can expect to see at least a 10% increase in their rates by the end of the year.
To put that more in perspective, in 2020, Citizens had less than 500,000 policies. Now, tens of thousands of Citizen policyholders may no longer be eligible for coverage under new direction by the state government if a private company offers to take over your policy and the higher premium is within 20% of what you pay Citizens, you are out automatically.
Republican State Representative Rick Roth and also Democratic State Senator Bobby Powell are here with us this morning. Let's go on the record about Citizens Insurance. So, gentlemen, in the past few weeks, homeowners have been getting letters just like this one from Citizens informing them that a private insurance company is willing to take them on, in some cases for thousands of dollars more. And this one, Citizens, is about $5,300. The new one, $8,400. So they say also in the letter that if you don't make a choice by October 5th, Citizens will go ahead and make that choice for them. So what do homeowners who are getting this letter need to know?
I'll tell you right now, one of the things that homeowners should know, Nathalie, is to look for that letter. If they have not gotten that letter and they're with Citizens, to call Citizens to make sure they understand what's about to happen. Because if the mail doesn't run and they do not get the letter, they could be forced to pay twice or sometimes 3 times more than they're currently paying. If your insurance, if you can find an insurance provider that will go up less than 20%, then you're going to have to leave Citizens. However, this letter will show you an insurance provider that will be a private company that could take you on. But if you don't recognize or look for that letter, you could be forced into that, and that could also price you out of paradise, which is what we call Palm Beach County. We have to be very, very careful. This letter has gone to, from my understanding, over 300,000 individuals who are currently in Citizens. If you're in Citizens, watch your mailbox, but also look up your policy now and make that phone call, because you have up until October 5th to act.
With those 1.3 million and rising policies, should thousands of Florida homeowners get hit by a catastrophic storm, are we sure that Citizens is capitalized well enough to cover all those policies?
I'm glad you asked that question, because to me that's one of the solutions we got to deal with. Obviously, it's the good faith and integrity of the state of Florida, and the state of Florida has like $20 billion in reserves. We put $1 billion into reinsurance during the special session. So yes, the state of Florida is obligated to stand behind Citizens. But you know, maybe when as new companies are coming into Florida, maybe we need to change some of the laws requiring them to be better capitalized, because the cost of homes, the cost of doing business, the cost of renovation, all those costs are going up dramatically. The value of my home that I've lived in for 20 years has doubled in the last 5 years in appreciation, and my policy has doubled in cost. So these insurance companies need to be better capitalized. I think that's part of the reason they're going insolvent, is they weren't properly capitalized.
All right, Representative Roth, Senator Powell, thank you both for joining us today.
Next, we're going on the record with ways to save on your homeowner's insurance and what more and more homeowners are doing that's putting them at risk. Welcome back. A recent survey by the Insurance Information Institute found more people in Florida are self-insuring their homes because of the rising cost of insurance. The survey found the average cost in the U.S. is around $1,700. Here in Florida, home insurance is the highest in the country, about $6,000 per year. Mark Friedlander from the Insurance Information Institute joins us now. Mark, thanks so much for being here with us. So self-insurance is up to about 20% here in our state. What exactly is that, and do homeowners face a risk?
What we're seeing not only in Florida but across the U.S. is a rise in homeowners that are not purchasing property insurance. That means they are self-insuring. They are taking the risk that if they suffer a loss, they will be able to recover from that loss without insurance. And that's a very big risk because very few homeowners in Florida or anywhere in the U.S. could afford to rebuild their homes without any insurance coverage. So it is an extremely risky proposition.
So, Mark, what ways can people save?
There are several ways. One of the most common ways across the country is called bundling. That means you purchase your home and auto insurance or home and perhaps life insurance with the same insurance carrier, and you can get a discount of 20% or more on both policies if you do that. Another way to save is changing your deductibles. That means increasing not only your standard homeowner's policy deductible, but your hurricane deductible. But the risk with that is if you increase the cost of your deductible, that means more out of pocket when you suffer a loss. So it's kind of a pro and con situation. There's also other ways to save. Smart home features like security systems, fire alarm systems.
Well, we appreciate you sharing those options with us. Thank you so much for your time. On the Record returns right after this.
Welcome back now to On the Record. The federal government has tallied 15 weather-related disasters that have each exceeded $1 billion in damage this year. That's a new record. Joining us now, Jeff Jones, FEMA Deputy Federal Coordinating Officer. Jeff, thanks for being here. Let's talk first about your most recent key target areas for your agency, including the Maui wildfire zone, flooding in the west, an impact area of Hurricane Idalia, which includes the state of Florida. Give people an idea what FEMA is doing in those places now.
So, Todd, what I can tell you is what we're working on in Florida on those events. We have a lot of staff, and we're engaging a whole community approach, and that is with federal agencies, state, local, and we're working very closely with the Florida Division of Emergency Management.
And what are they doing for people specifically? Can you give us an idea?
Absolutely. So far, for an example, in Palm Beach County in Hurricane Ian, there's been approximately $4.5 million that's been distributed directly to 4,700 families. And that is to jumpstart their recovery from Ian.
Okay, now I want to specifically talk about your experience here. I know you've worked more than 20 of these very large weather disasters in your career. There's Broward, there's Idalia and Ian right here in Florida alone. Do you perceive that we're seeing more of these catastrophic weather events that you're having to deal with?
We are definitely seeing a rise here in Florida. I mean, we're not all the way through the season. And as you mentioned in your intro, there's a lot going on. And with that, we want to make sure that people start preparing.
All right, that's Jeff Jones of FEMA. Thank you so much for joining us here on The Record.
On WPBF.com and our free WPBF 25 News app, you can watch all of the interviews conducted this morning. And we want to thank our guests for going on the record with us about the homeowners insurance crisis.
That's episode number 1. We encourage you to be part of our discussions each Sunday at 10 a.m. as we identify questions and explore solutions to issues and topics impacting our communities right here in South Florida.
Matter of Fact with Soledad O'Brien is coming up next. Todd and I will see you back here next Sunday.